Now, RuneScape is, at its core, a game about dealing more damage, but one mistake I see people make a lot is they will spend millions or billions of GP on new gear when there are tons of things you can do for free or for very cheap to increase your damage with minimal effort. Because dealing damage is more than just what you are wearing. So today we're going to be covering a few of my favorite little tips to kill bosses quicker, do your Slayer tasks faster, or just generally deal more damage. Now, obviously the two main ways to increase your damage is to get higher levels or to buy more expensive gear. But those are time consuming or expensive endeavors. But yes, getting higher strength level, getting higher range level, that is priority number one. But today we're talking about smaller things you can do like today to increase your damage. Now the first underrated way to deal more damage is a level 4 prayer, Burst of Strength. And the reason that this is so good now is because there was a change to it very recently. Now, obviously, Burst of Strength is a level 4 prayer. It's not as good as Piety, it's not as good as Superhuman Strength even, but what it does have is an incredibly low drain rate. Burst of Strength drains your prayer at the exact same rate as Protect item, which is almost nothing. So if you go ahead and turn it on right now, literally go do it. I know you're AFKing on the side, do it. It can last over an hour before it runs out. Even at mid-level prayer, you'll get well over half an hour of use from this thing that you should literally have it on all the time. There's no reason to turn it off. It's a free 5% strength bonus, which in most cases will increase your max hit by 1 or even 2 damage points, which is kind of insane value for places that, you know, you might not be wanting to use Piety the whole time. I always have this on when I'm killing Slayer monsters. You don't have to think about it. If you're doing Nightmare Zone, slap this thing on. Sand crabs, it's really the freest way to increase your damage while you are AFKing. Even if you go up 1 prayer rank to Superhuman Strength, the amount that your prayer drains goes up exponentially. So that's why I think Burst of Strength has so much value. Okay, next up here, we have Divine Potions. Now, Divine Potions can be expensive, but there's a way to make them more economical. Now, the reason Divine Potions are so good is because they will keep your stats boosted to the maximum amount for the entire duration of the potion. Now, for stats like attack and defense, that doesn't matter as much, but for a super strength potion and a ranging potion, having your stats be maxed out the entire time is actually quite important. Sometimes even losing a single level off the boost will reduce your max hit by 1 or even 2 sometimes in the cases of when a Slayer helm's involved. Using Divine Potions is honestly worth it and a relatively inexpensive way to increase your damage. But if you want to save some money off that, really all you need is a Divine Ranging Potion and a Divine Super Strength Potion. If you're willing to use a little bit more inventory space, you can bring a Divine Super Strength Potion separately. Have you guys ever tried Gnome Restaurant? It's somehow over 1.5 mil an hour. The idea is pretty simple. You deliver food to gnomes all around Gielinor. They love it, and it's essentially what HelloFresh does, and that's why I'm really happy to say that HelloFresh is sponsoring today's video. Although I am terrible at cooking, I actually find it enjoyable. I just struggle to come up with ideas and the motivation to go get everything. HelloFresh fixes this though by sending you everything you need to make a healthy home-cooked meal right to your doorstep. Each box can be customized to the meal. For example, if you're vegetarian, you can order specifically veggie meals. If you like pasta, you can go heavy on the noodles. If you want to order 5 Mexican meals, you can do that if you want. Each week, HelloFresh has a massive menu to choose from over 50 dinner options and even more market items, so you'll never run out of things to try. Right now, with each box, you're also going to receive a free breakfast item, so you essentially get free breakfast for life, as long as you have the subscription. So I would highly recommend giving HelloFresh a try, as right now they're also offering a discount to my channel viewers. All you have to do is click the link in my description, or use my code FLIPNOV10 to get 10 free meals and free breakfast for life. 1 breakfast item per box while you have an active subscription, if you're in the US. Outside the US, the local discount will apply. And thank you so much to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video. So the next thing here is not an item, it's not a prayer, but it is a technique to deal more damage, and that is don't miss your attack timings. Now, one mistake I think people make a lot is bringing too many gear switches that they can't handle. Yes, bringing larger gear switches can increase your damage, but it's actually detrimental if you are missing attacks while you're trying to switch your 8-way gear switch. This is especially the case if the content requires you to gear switch often. So if you're killing Zulrah, for example, and you're bringing a large gear switch, but it takes you an extra few ticks to do the entire gear switch, you have missed a lot of damage just simply by not attacking. So what I would focus on is bringing a smaller gear switch to begin with and making sure you can switch within the window of your attack weapon, which is usually going to be 4 or 5 game ticks. Once you've practiced and got that down, you can increase it by 1 or 2 items, but in general, having 0 attack downtime is going to be better than having a larger amount of gear options. Okay, next up here we have Thralls. This is probably the easiest DPS you're going to get in the entire game. This does require a Kingdom Divided, but it's kind of roughly a free 0.6, 0.7 DPS just by casting the Thrall. Now obviously Thralls get higher value depending on the boss you're killing. If the encounter is very long, then the Thrall DPS adds up to be a lot. The reason Thralls are so good is because Thralls ignore defense and can hit up to 3 damage regardless of how tanky a monster is, so the longer the boss fight, the more value you get from Thralls. But regardless, if you have the inventory space and are okay being on the RKS spellbook, they are just simply free DPS, assuming you cast them. You do have to cast them. They don't do anything if it's sitting in your inventory and you forget to use them, which I do all the time. Now probably the best way to increase your damage is to take less damage. Now that is maybe an obvious statement and easier said than done in some cases. Now the reason that reducing your damage increases your own damage so much is because of the attack delay that is on hard food. So if you eat a lobster, if you eat a shark, you are locked out of attacking for I think 3 ticks. So that straight up just reduces your damage by a significant amount. Now obviously, some damage is unavoidable in this game. You're obviously not going to be like Neo dodging every single thing perfectly, and people make mistakes even when they're very competent at bosses or content. But regardless of the boss, there are definitely ways to reduce damage taken, whether it be making sure you're praying correctly, moving to the correct tile, or implementing some more advanced techniques to mitigate damage. Now, a side tangent to this is when you do have to eat or brew down, try to do it when there is downtime in the fight anyway. So a good example is Zulrah. Zulrah has a lot of unavoidable damage, but it's ideal to eat food if you have to, as Zulrah is changing forms, because you can't attack during that time anyway. So you can eat a piece of food, switch gear, and you have minimal downtime instead of eating while Zulrah is blasting you anyway, so you could just end up in the cycle of constantly eating. Now this is also true for Saradomin brews. Even though there's no attack delay on the Saradomin brew, it does drain your stats, albeit usually temporarily because people are going to be using super restores, but having to use them less just straight up will increase your damage. And speaking of Saradomin brews, another way to increase your damage is to minimize your brewed down stats. Now more specifically, I'm talking about in raids when you are using things like overloads or salts. Now the good thing about these raid potions is they will boost your stats up every 15 seconds or so, which is great. You don't have to restore your stats yourself. But if you are taking damage and using Saradomin brews, your stats will still be drained, albeit temporarily. So similar to how you might want to use food during a bit of downtime in the fight, you want to use your brews right before your overload or salt re-ups. Now the way you do this is you look in your buff bar, you can see what the timer is for the drain, and you just use them right before every 15-second interval. The only way to do this with 0 DPS loss is to use only 1 dose of your brew, and then it'll get instantly reboosted. You might be taking more damage, so you're just doing the best you can, but in an ideal world, this would mean 0 damage loss. Now one thing that can vastly increase your damage depending on the situation is making sure you are on the correct attack style. You can bring all the perfect gear in the world, but if you're not using the correct attack style, it won't matter that much. Now the attack style you should be using is determined by the weapon you are using and the monster you are fighting. Each weapon will have different bonuses based on the style you are using. Certain weapons will have multiple different styles to use, and some will have only one style, and monsters have weaknesses to those styles as well. Now it's going to get kind of confusing, and by far the easiest way to determine what you should be using is just coming over here to the View DPS button, which will automatically import your gear into the Wiki's DPS tool. So for example, I was killing tormented demons, and I have this absolute mess of gear on. Trust me, it did end up being the best. But if we come over here and check the attack styles, we can see how our damage differs based on the style. So we have 2 slash options and a stab option. And tormented demons are actually weak to stab, so switching to lunge actually increases our damage a tremendous amount. Now if a monster doesn't have a particular weakness to the weapon you're using, I'd recommend usually using the aggressive attack style, as this will give you an invisible +3 boost, which often can get you a max hit. Now, of course, if you want to train your other melee combats, you might not want to do this, but if you're looking for the highest damage, using the aggressive style will usually give you the highest amount of DPS, unless a monster has a specific weakness. Now, one final way to increase your damage is to make sure you are taking advantage of your special attack. This is a resource in and to itself, and with the addition of the Light Bearer, you can now have access to more special attacks than ever before. Now, with special attack options becoming more affordable lately, with things like Burning Claws being introduced, the Bandos Godsword's only like 13 mil, Dragon Warhammer's only like 20 mil, they've gotten a lot cheaper. You don't need Dragon Claws or a Zerite crossbow to use your special attack energy. Obviously, what one you will use varies vastly on the boss you're doing, but if you're looking for damage, Burning Claws are a great option. And for spec reduction, a Bandos Godsword is a pretty cost-effective option right now that works at a lot of places. Obviously, a Dragon Warhammer is better some places, but making sure you are at least using your spec energy will increase your damage either by lowering the monster defense, which will just straight up increase your damage, or just being a DPS spec weapon, which will increase your damage by doing more damage. A pretty direct trade there. Anyway guys, that's all I got for you. Hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.